Hey, we are live. Today we're gonna go live with Chef Two. He is a chef, top chef, season 15. I'm definitely a fan. Hi. Well, you're the first live person that jumped on super quick, so we're not awkwardly waiting there. Hey, Chef, how's it going?
Hi, I'm great. How are you doing?
Doing good, doing
Good.
good. It's been a long month for sure. And today is June, so this year has gone by super, super fast. But just want to welcome everybody that's jumping in. Hello, welcome. We are doing a live today talking about just mental health, food, family, culture, and we're gonna fit all that in 30 minutes. That's our ambitious goal. We're gonna be super Asian and be super ambitious. No, I'm kidding. Um, but yeah, I guess we can start with like how we got connected. Yeah, how did you find my Instagram in the first place?
I think I was just perusing, and I guess I saw your content show up on my channel feed. And interesting enough, you were talking about mental awareness and mental health, and it caught my attention is mainly because I don't see a lot of mental health discussions in the AAPI space. So naturally, I engaged and saw the things you were talking about, and I think it's beautiful because you are welcoming individuals like myself and others, specifically Asian American and beyond, to have a conversation to heal yourself. And I think
Yeah.
there's a lot of different things that get in the way with that. I think for men, there's masculinity. I think social pressures, cultural pressures, family pressures. But I think that's total BS because, I think if there's anything precious in our lives that we have is called happiness. And we
Mm.
have to protect that at all costs. We have to work towards that at all costs. Right.
Absolutely.
So,
And in order to do that, we have to face all those things that are barriers, right, to our healing and our happiness. I
yes.
love
And
that.
I take this beautiful quote from the late Nipsey Hussle that he says that, and I think it's really about mental health. He says that you can choose to be at war with everyone else. You can choose to be you can choose to be at war with yourself and then at peace with everyone else, or
Mm,
you can choose to have peace with yourself and be at war with the world.
mm,
So
yeah.
oh
And it
yeah,
is a choice, right? Yeah.
it is a choice. Yep, mm, it is a
Yeah, that's a
choice.
good quote. I'm gonna write that down. um, yeah, so thank you so much for sharing. Why don't you share a little bit about yourself? You have exciting things going on, and your new film, Bloodline, got Emmy nominated, so congratulations.
Hey, thank you. Yeah, so I think the blessings are coming, and I think I'm just happy to have opportunities to do stuff. And no matter what it is, I have no prejudgment on what they are. I'm always willing and open to try new experiences, and I think that's how I became a chef, then top chef, and then film producer, and an author now. I'm working on a
Mm,
cookbook with Soleil. That'll be coming
wow.
out in 2024. And I think just trusting the world and trusting the universe on what the universe brings you, and trusting that and just putting your best foot forward. And I think
Yeah.
in addition to, I think we've always been told most of our lives that we can't have these multiple complex identities, especially passions. You're supposed to just have like one job and do it well, right?
Hmm.
I think I'm excited to know that I am a complex identity and I have multiple passions. And if you plan it out right, I think it's absolutely possible to pursue them all, right?
Hmm.
So,
Absolutely. I
mhm.
love that you can be able to hold more than one thing, right?
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
yeah, tell us a little bit about your film, Bloodline. Like, what is Bloodline?
So, Bloodline is a documentary that's been airing nationally on PBS ever since earlier this year in February. And since then, it's been nominated for a local Emmy in the historical and cultural category. And it's a documentary about myself and my family, in particular, my mom and my father, both being um, from the seafood space, both islanders, and my father being a fishmonger, and how he took home fish scraps basically to feed our family. So it's about food prejudice and being Southeast Asian and being immigrants and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
Mhm.
Yeah. And so what is like the bloodline? Is that part of the fish or like that's a piece, like that's the secret sauce that you use, right?
So bloodline is symbolic of my bloodline and my inheritance
Mhm.
from my family in terms of knowledge and culture. In addition to that, where it's literally talking about the bloodline in a fish, which exists
Yeah.
between the flesh and the skin. And that is something that's usually considered fishy and people throw away. However, my parents have found ways to eat it through their very innovative cooking techniques, right? So I think
Yeah.
it has a multitude of definitions, given it's the title of the film.
Yeah, I
Very
love that.
symbolic.
Like how symbolic it is of your own bloodline it is, and then also like the piece that have has been discriminated against in, the culinary world, right? That you are kind of reclaiming and bringing back. So I just thought after watching your film, I was just like, oh man, this has so many different layers to it, and I can't wait to like I have to talk to you. you know. But first,
I
can
think
you just yeah,
uh, I'm sorry, you're
go ahead.
saying.
No, go ahead.
I think one of the things about that film is that it's an empowerment to who we are as immigrants and both people, or quote unquote both people, right? Is that I think the rest of the world wants to portray us, especially here in America, that we were weak and we were crawling to the shores to be saved by Americans. And I think of it as the polar opposite, is that
Yeah.
we are badasses. We navigated the seas and pirates, and then we didn't crawl onto shore. We jumped onto shore and landed with strength and power and beauty. And
Mm.
I think it's the same thing when it comes to innovation. Excuse my French, I know it's IG Live, but you give me fucking anybody in a situation of poverty and try to feed themselves and make beautiful and delicious foods. I see that as empowerment,
Oh
not,
yeah.
we're not seeking, we're not seeking any sort of, what is it called? Pettiness or grief or anything like that. We're way beyond that. So
Hmm.
the story,
Yeah.
once again, is a story of empowerment, a story of celebration,
Yeah.
and giving power to innovations in the most unlikely, unanglicized spaces. And in this sort of space, it's specifically my mother and my father. So,
Yeah. I
mhm.
love that. It's like you are using food to change the narrative of, how we as Asian Americans, Asians have been seen, right? And that's, yeah, even just when I first came across your Instagram account, the way that you are storytelling in your cooking, in your film, it showed me that like there's just so much through food that we are sort of missing out on when we don't understand where our food comes from, the story behind it, the history, right? The people behind it. There's a huge piece of us that's missing. And even just as like Asian Americans growing up here, there's been such a loss of language or country, right? And there's sort of that disconnect that we have with our parents. But food is the one that like has become that language, at least for me. And a lot of Asian Americans that I speak with.
Well,
I know.
food is a universal language, but I think most importantly, it's a safe space for most people. I through the medium of food, I've cooked with incarcerated men in San Quentin Penitentiary, through a rehabilitation program. I cook with moms. I cook with youth. I've cooked in probably one of the most racist places in America, you know, in the Pacific Northwest, where I think it was like the capital of the Aryan Brotherhood. Like
Oh gosh.
I've cooked in very polarizing communities, but I think just through the vessel of food, it's very safe and it welcomes
Yeah.
conversation, right? And
Yeah.
food is the universal thing. If you make something good, people will be like, "Wow, thank you for cooking for me," right? They'll listen. But I think it's the same thing for the film. We use food as a vessel for my mom to open up. When she talks about the food and ingredients, like she opens up in a most genuine way because our food memories are actually rooted in our personal experiences, sometimes in happy places and also trauma. And I think you absolutely would see that in the film. My mom was talking about dishes and ingredients and food.
Mhm.
And I think that's the thing where which got me most really excited about Bloodline, our film, is that we were able to just get an insight to talk about publicly about the traumas of that Asian Americans experience,
Yeah.
specifically those who endure war in diaspora.
Yeah.
So, and I'm sad to say, but there's not a lot of films out there like that. There's not a lot of conversation. There's not a lot of language. I think.
Oh, you cut out for a little. Can't hear you. Oh,
I'm sorry, my phone,
sorry, you
my
cut
phone
out
went
for.
out. Sorry, is that better?
Gotta get that
Yeah, my
airplane
phone
mode
was
on.
ringing. Uh, yeah, let me turn on air. Is that better?
Okay, there we go. Yeah,
Can you hear me
so
now?
why don't we sort of
Okay, there you go.
yeah, why don't we sort of backtrack a little bit because you're talking about food allows like an opening, right, to be able to have some of those harder conversations just because of how like food really like disarms people, right? Like when you're
Mhm.
coming to the table and you're like in communion and you're sharing and breaking bread, right? It's sort of like this peace offering and it allows for that deeper conversation of like hard shit. So, can you just tell us a little bit more about like growing up and like what that was like for you as an Asian American and even just like your relationship with food?
Oh, for sure. So both of my parents are once again refugee immigrants, and they have tremendous, um, till this day, they have undiagnosed PTSD, in the way they move, in their habits and behavior. Just for reference and context, I grew up in a home where my father had nailed all the windows shuts, because he had this like extreme paranoia about what would happen to our family.
Yeah.
And for more context, he's been through two wars. He, was had some. He was in a war where it was like Vietnamese Democratic versus Khmer Rouge. Saw a lot of
Mhm.
horrible things there as a young man. And in addition to that, he witnessed the Vietnam War and had to endure all those crazy things that happened to him. And similarly, and naturally, same thing with my mother. So with all those sort of like unspoken things that happened during war, we're talking about not just poverty, but we're talking about famine, food. What is it called? Food rationing, which results in the famine. Um, um, you're seeing murder, you're seeing death, you're seeing all these things that I think would traumatize any person, no matter what age group you are, and instills this sort of understanding or view of the world where it's not a safe place. And I think my parents carried that with them, immigrating over to Oakland.
Mm.
And I think my dad, even though we lived in Oakland, but I think my dad went a little bit over into the extreme, fueled by his PTSD, by nailing all the windows shut. You know, Other things that's very similar. That is known from rooted from PTSDs. If we close the door too hard, he would flip out. I'm not talking about
Mm.
like upset. I'm talking about like flip out, like he'll start yelling.
Yeah.
My mother would hide food in really random places, like in a closet, like in a bathroom. They're often treats, like small little candies, small little chocolates.
Yeah.
And that's I come to the realization and understanding, just talking to other therapists in community spaces. They say that's a sign of food insecurity during war. A lot of people who experience war do that because they don't know when their next meal is coming from. They don't know if they're
Yeah.
ever going to have a piece of candy ever again, so they hide it so they got to eat it later. And my mom does it to this day.
Hmm.
So it's all these things that just gives a small insight of um,
The
um,
world.
the world, how my parents were, and what I endured. That's why I want to talk about mental health so much, because the imbalance in my home, specifically with PTSD, it was really difficult and normalized in my youth. My mom sometimes would freak out, and I thought this was totally normal. Like she'll wake me up at 2 and 3 in the morning, just to make sure that I was okay. Or if I had my door locked, I'm a teenager, she would knock on the door until I would open it. If
Mhm.
I'm out, she'll call me like 30 times in a row. even if I'm
Mm.
working and at work. And that went through into like, that continued into like my 20s. Like she'll just freak out. I think it's one of those things
Yeah.
where, PTSD, if goes undiagnosed, can take a toll on people, not just themselves individually, but your whole entire family.
Oh, yeah,
Um,
absolutely. It shapes your whole world, your view of yourself, your view of your relationships, your children, right? And that overprotectiveness makes sense because, like, what they had gone through, separation meant like death or never seeing that family
mhm,
member again, right?
mhm.
So
Yeah, absolutely.
it makes sense, but like I imagine like being a kid living through that, like did it ever like how did it affect you? Did you ever think like is this normal? Like what is going on?
I have to tell you this, that, I don't want, I'm not asking for any sob stories or any pity for my childhood, but I think my childhood was a very unique one. And even though all like these weird things have been normalized in my life, I've found that there's a positive and a negative. The positive is that it created strength in me to find ways to navigate it, to sort of empower myself and give me a yearning to understand more and why my parents are like that. So that's a positive. The negative is that it put me in a deep emotional hole for many years. I was a very angry teenager because I had no understanding of my identity. I didn't know why my father was angry at me for 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 very basic things like closing the door, and making a sound, or
Yeah.
crying and wanting to open the window because I was it was stuffy, and I
Mm,
felt that I was demonized for those things. And I always felt that I was black sheeped, or I felt like I was the wrong person or whatever it was.
yeah.
And as I get older, I start to realize that these aren't normal things that my parents were like, being aggressive about.
Yeah.
And, just to go further and deeper to understand that they've been through horrific things. And, it took a lot of listening, understanding, education in the most indirect ways through family members for me to understand the context of why they were the way they are,
Yeah.
so um would I want any other person to go through that? No. I think it was incredibly difficult for me. Not to say that it's impossible, but I think if you start with mental health and mental health education, not just for your parents but for yourself, I think that's a great start because you could get a better context of why your parents are the way they are. Specifically, those
Mm,
who are children of immigrants or who come from diaspora. A lot of
mm-hmm.
my friends are Southeast Asian, Khmer, Hmong, Laos, yeah, black as well, brown. A lot of us come from diaspora. A lot of us
Yeah.
come from diaspora. A lot of us come from war-torn countries in Oakland. But at the same token, a lot of my friends, because they weren't provided an identity or explanation of why things the way they were or why their parents act the way they did towards them. A lot of them, committed themselves to gang life. A lot of them are in jail. Some of them are dead, unfortunately. And I think for me, just for our population of society, if we talk about mental health, I believe that's, especially in our youth, right? Especially teaching kids that, that's a good first step at crime prevention, boosting the economy because kids will excel better. They'll have a better understanding, and we really take for granted how much kids understand and know. Like the things that I observe, the the horrific things that I not horrific, but the traumas that I observed in my youth, I remember it crystal clear to this day. There's moments of my trauma where I've blacked out, but as I revisit it as an adult, like it's crystal clear. You know. Um,
Yeah. And it seems like, you definitely did not fit into that like model minority stereotype, right?
oh
That
God,
we
oh
have
God,
the
no.
right, that assumption that, all Asians are quiet, hardworking, like they get straight A's. How did that, if it did, like, did it, that stereotype, did you ever feel it growing up?
I've always yearned to be different. I think I grew up in a predominantly black neighborhood, so a lot of my friends were black and brown. And
Mhm.
then if they were Asian, they were Khmer. So even if I wanted to connect with my Vietnamese roots, I was a special case, I guess, where I identified with everyone outside my community. And for reference, for those who haven't met me yet, I'm 6'2". I'm like 240 pounds. I'm a big guy. I've always been a big guy.
Mhm.
So even if I wanted to fit the stereotype, I didn't. Um,
Yeah.
However, my parents were forever forcing that model minority myth upon me,
Yeah.
and they have specific um, allowances on what the model minority is. My sister fit it pretty perfectly because she was Asian and she was female and she accelerated in academics. And, for her, they reserved the world for her. For me, um, and in my family, my paternal side, we have not such great history of the men in my family on my paternal side. Like, a lot of men who've fallen off the tracks of life. And I was kind of deemed to be the same. So because I didn't fit the model minority, even though I graduated high school with like a 3.2, my parents were getting me ready to go work in a factory. College wasn't even the
Mm.
conversation.
Mm.
It was either the upper echelon and you fit this model minority category or nothing at all. I was at that point I was a failure. Like
Mm.
talk about standards, right? you know.
Yeah. Yeah. And how did
Um,
that affect you, like in your view of yourself and like your belief in yourself?
I was very destructive,
Yeah.
and I the reason one of the reasons why I lean into community so much is because that was the context I have my parents, and I love my parents. Like they just, just given their background and their experiences, they were very limited on to see what the possibilities were or are for someone like their son. But literally was the community of Oakland that really changed my life. It was it was an employer who patted me on the back and said I did a good job and said that I was smart. Like my father never
Mhm.
told me that. I was already labeled stupid. Because he got upset. He would get upset because I would do things to freak him out by his PTSD.
Yeah.
And my father, he lost his father when he was like 13 years old. He's the oldest male in his family. Of a family of 10. So he doesn't, for him, father son bonding, he doesn't know it. It doesn't exist.
Right.
Um,
Right.
eh, in addition to that, I believe my father to this day struggles with reading and writing in his own native language, and I think he may have a form of dyslexia. And I think that feeds into sort of the traumas that he kind of shells out to myself and our family. And I think there's insecurities there that and I feel sad for him because we've never been able to address it. You know,
Yeah.
um,
Yeah. And so
so there's
definitely like
a
passing
lot.
that down onto you, like what he, struggle with, or maybe you could kind of um, redeem it in some way. Is that sort of that feeling?
I, you know, I try to. I think forgiveness. I don't know if I want to call it redeemed, but I think forgiveness is a big thing. I think
Mm.
we have. I think I've learned as a 37-year-old man now. I think that I've learned that um, you should learn to love the world and the people around you, and to be able to
Yeah.
love people. No one's ever going to be perfect. You have to learn how to forgive people, and I've learned a very long time ago to forgive my parents. You
Yeah.
know, is that they're human. They've been through what they've been through, and I try to count my blessings. They gave me life, they gave me breath, they gave me food, and I think with those two things alone, those three things alone, I seek the opportunity. You know, so
Yeah.
I try to look at the cup half full, and I think if anything, that's served me um, as fuel for my fire for every opportunity that I get into. Because I think if you get to know me more, I'm just happy to be here. I'm blessed to be here. I know what dirt
Yeah.
tastes like. I know what dirt tastes like. I have my friends that aren't breathing, because they lost their life to the game too young. So I'm just fucking happy to be here. I'm
Yeah.
happy,
Right.
and if you give me a chance, you give me an opportunity, I'm about to go so hard, and I have this sort of mentality where I don't believe in the best, I don't believe in talent. I think talent is 75% of it, but the other 25% is who's willing to work the hardest, who's willing to
Mhm.
work the hardest,
Yeah.
so I think
And
that's what I bring.
it's so beautiful hearing you talk about that because like that concept of forgiveness, it's almost recognizing that like, your parents, they were just trying to survive, you know?
Oh yeah,
Like for
oh yeah,
them, survival was like the ceiling, right?
oh yeah.
And because they're able to survive, you're able to make their ceiling like your floor. You're able to stand on top of their shoulders, right? Yeah,
Absolutely,
even
yeah,
though growing up it wasn't like all rainbows and butterflies, but it was because they survived. It allows you to live now and
for sure,
thrive and go hard. And when you do that, you are honoring what they have sacrificed, what they have went through,
for sure. and
and
and I
that's,
feel like if you could learn how to forgive for your own mental health's sake,
oh,
if you've learned how
yes.
to forgive your own family members, no matter, I mean, there are some unforgivable things, but even then, I think there's moments of forgiveness, meaning that I'm not going to pour my energy, or I'm not going to, I've moved on from the moment in terms of forgiveness. I think if you
Yeah,
learn how to forgive in all of its aspects, you could then apply, especially with your own family, you could then apply that to other moments and situations that will only be empowering for you. And then
yeah,
you would use your energy and focus to heal yourself, create happiness for yourself, protect happiness
yeah,
for yourself,
yeah,
and
yeah.
be happy in life. I think that's the thing. No matter how much money you have, if you don't have happiness, you ain't got fucking shit. Seriously.
Hmm. Yeah,
Like, you could be rich but you're miserable, but really though, like, what's the point of being rich and miserable, like,
yeah. Because
or
that's all external, right? Like you have all these external things, but inside you're like in anguish and you're suffering. Like none of that external stuff matters if the internal isn't fulfilled, right? And when
exactly,
you're talking about forgiveness, you're like, people think forgiveness is like releasing people from responsibility or whatever. No, forgiveness is actually freeing yourself from being
exactly,
consumed by pain, right?
exactly,
You are
exactly,
liberating yourself. And in liberating yourself, you're actually creating a bridge to be able to like reach out and connect and reconcile if the opportunity is there. You know,
absolutely,
and
yeah.
I'm wondering, like, when was that a moment for you when you were like, I forgive my parents. I realized that I've let that go, or when did it come to you?
I think it came to me through food. I think right around when I wanted to learn more about my parents, and then we decided to do a documentary about them. And I think, opposed to being angry and shelling out my emotions, I think sometimes it's important to just listen. You know,
Yeah.
like, once you put everything out into the world that you felt and heard, and put out to the universe on what your feelings and emotions are. I think it's important to just listen sometimes, because what we think and why we get angry, based on like very transactional sort of reasons, we can never predict and foresee the reasons of the universe or the reasons of the world. It's impossible. And the only way for you to do that is to absorb and listen. So be a student, listen, you know. I'm not saying that you shouldn't express yourself, but I think, and you could apply that with anyone, a friend, somebody that you're angry with, a brother or sister, or somebody you've beefed with in the past, somebody you fought with in the past. I think if you just allow, if both parties just allow opportunity to speak and listen, I think,
Mm,
you know, you start to understand at the end of the day, people fuck up, and,
yeah.
at the end of the day, we're just being human. It's human to fuck up, and you have to
Yeah.
be forgiving. It's not to say that you have to forgive the person and then trust them immediately. No, you don't have to trust them. Like, if people keep fucking up, like, you can continue to be, you could, forgive them and just not interact with them, but at least
Hmm.
you forgave, right?
Yeah. Because it's for
So,
you at the end of the day. It's how you can move on, right?
hmm
And
hmm
and so when you know, think about your journey of like growing up food insecure and then now being a chef, like what has food, you know, brought to your life? Like how has that healed you?
So I think being food insecure all the way up to going to culinary school and all like the fine dining places I worked, whatever you want to call it, like I never thought in a million years that I would be celebrated or my family would be celebrated to talk about the lack of food that we have, you know?
Yeah.
That's fucking amazing. Like I could knock on wood, I could die tomorrow. That's good vibes, but I'm not. I want a full life, you know,
Yeah.
and to have a film come out of it and have it celebrated, have to have a cookbook stem from that, and have it celebrated, and to make these recipes kind of rooted and stem from that and have it celebrated, you know, like
Mm.
there's years that I went through self shame where I compared myself to other chefs. Other chefs talk about, oh yeah, like my family has the grandest Christmas, the grandest Thanksgiving, and I couldn't relate because oftentimes the stuff that we had on our dinner table was bare bones, a bare bone carcass chicken with no meat on it. That my mom got from
Mm.
the butcher shop for free to make soup out of.
Yeah.
And this is embarrassing, but like I had to go to the doctor because my digestive system wasn't working right because I ate so much rice, and if you eat too much rice, it'll clog up your digestive system, and
Mm.
that's just how much rice I ate. I just, we didn't have anything else. It was just rice, you know.
Hmm. Yeah.
Um,
So how did that like make you like pursue like a passion in food?
I think the way it instills my passion for food is that when you don't have ingredients, like you obsess over it more. Like when I would cook with my mom, and say she had chicken soup and she usually put carrots in it, and when she doesn't put the carrots in it, like I would miss the carrots because that's the only other element in the soup outside of like the
Yeah.
chicken bones and the broth. So I would
Yeah.
obsess over the carrot, and I would like it would register in my mind mentally of what it tastes like. And same thing for onions and celery when we have it, and watercress and black pepper, all
Mm.
these like really basic elements, right? Like
Mm.
I think without me even knowing it, the insecurity created an obsession for me to study and know the food even more, right?
Yeah,
Um,
because you're analyzing all parts of it and you're imagining what it's like. Whereas someone who grew up with it, they're not even thinking, they're taking these things for granted. And even
yeah,
just from our conversation, like the sense that I'm getting from you is just like this sense of gratitude for everything that, you know, has happened in your life, even like the not so good parts, even the difficult parts, that like there's just a sense of gratitude for the food that you're cooking, the
mm-hmm,
elements, the ingredients, the people, the history, the culture. And
mm-hmm,
yeah, I hope you film more stories and documentaries about you and your
mm-hmm,
fam
mm-hmm,
by Elsie Sun. Thank you for that comment.
mm-hmm.
Um,
Thank you. Yeah.
yeah, but thank you so much for taking the time to really just share your journey. I hope, you know, we can continue to talk more about mental health, especially in the Asian community, especially as we address like intergenerational trauma, PTSD, that things that are being passed down, and finding ways to heal, you know, ourselves and our communities. And it's just so beautiful that you're able to do that through food. You know, connect to your
Mm-hmm.
culture, connect to your family, connect to your people. Um, I
And
just want to, yeah,
if I could just add to that too, it's that
yeah,
intergenerational trauma. Even though we're talking about AAPI or AA and HPI, I think all these things. Hopefully, you guys watch the film. All these sort of thoughts are very universal to the black, white, brown,
yes,
yellow
absolutely.
community. So
Hmm.
if anything, I want to put forward and seed in people that, it's not a theme about me being Vietnamese or immigrant or whatever. It's a theme about family. And I hope to connect with you all through the medium of family, you know.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
We all have stories, right? And it's about connecting through the intersections of our intersectionalities, right? It's not like oppression Olympics or my story's better than yours or harder than this, but it's about recognizing the humanity in each other, right? And connecting in those spaces.
Of
And that's so
course.
beautiful. And so
Absolutely.
I want
Mhm.
to ask, where can we watch your film?
If you guys go to my link in my bio on Instagram, there's a link there. There's a actual image button that you could click to watch Bloodline. Or you can search on YouTube as well. Just type in Bloodline Chef 2 and it should come up. And you guys could watch it for free. We consciously wanted to make it free, accessible content specifically on YouTube, so that way our content could be impactful, opposed to offering it on a streaming platform. And I'm not going to mention any names that you have to pay for.
Yes. But I think that's so beautiful because it makes our stories more accessible. And we need our stories to be out there, not just the one dimensional, like Crazy Rich Asian story, which is like that 1% of people, right? Like we need all stories to
Yeah,
be reflected. And I think that, yeah, I'm going to go and
for
watch it
sure.
again. But I want to
For
ask
sure.
one last question
Sure.
is if you were to kind of go back in time, right, and see your younger self,
Mhm.
what would you say to him? What would you want him to know?
I wouldn't tell my younger self anything. I would give my younger self a hug and said, "You're doing great. You know,
Yeah.
I'm so proud of you. You're doing great. And when you think people don't love you, they do. It's
Yeah.
just love comes in different shapes and forms. But I have this whole thing with like Back to the Future and like, like saying the wrong thing and changing the future. But I think the smartest thing to do is the first thing I would do is give my younger self a hug.
Yeah.
I don't regret any of the experiences that I've gone through, even the darkest moments in my life.
Yeah.
As I get older, I feel that the universe gives the most difficult paths to those who are the strongest, right?
Mm,
And
mm,
then you take that into a lesson, and then you turn it into a responsibility, you know. So I feel that I endure certain flames so I can go out and make change from that flame, you know.
yeah.
Like food
Yeah.
insecurity, right? Like you endure food insecurity, and you would hope that that same person who endured food insecurity would do something to prevent it in the future because they endured it themselves, you know.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And
So
you
yeah,
bringing bloodline back into your dishes, right? Like you're just changing the narrative left and right because of the prejudice or the experiences that you have, and you're making it your own. You're owning it, and that's so beautiful. So
yeah.
there's some
Thank you.
recommendations or requests of you doing a bloodline series. Yes, that would be amazing. I know you have 10 things on your plate, no pun intended. Um, but
there's
yeah,
there's
thank you
definitely more
so
content,
much.
coming. So just stay tuned. Definitely more
Yes, we are
content coming. Yeah.
excited for that content. I'm just so excited for everything that you have going on. Thank you so much for just embodying like just this empowerment, coming from a place of pain and hardship, but turning that into power and just going through. I know that that journey was not linear. It was like zigzaggy up and down and
Mhm.
whatever.
Yeah.
But, I think you're just such a great example for, how to channel that pain into something beautiful. So
Yeah.
I want to
Thank
thank you.
you. No,
Yeah,
thank you
thank you
for
so
having me.
much.
Thank you for
Yeah,
having me.
and yeah, thank you for dismantling just this model minority narrative and, keep doing what you're doing. So,
Absolutely. And if I could sign off and remind everyone, create your happiness and protect your happiness at all costs. Period.
yeah,
Right? Cool.
yes. And on that note, perfect words to end by. So, thank you so much again. Thank you for everyone tuning in, and hopefully, we'll see you again next time.
Thank you guys.
Bye.
Bye.